You don't fall for emotional traps because you're weak. You fall for them because you're human. If you've ever found yourself trusting someone who later hurt you, staying in situations that drained you, or believing words that turned out to be empty, you probably asked yourself, what's wrong with me? You replay the moments. You search for the red flags you missed. You blame yourself for being naive, too hopeful, too soft. But here's the truth, most people never tell you. Emotional traps don't work on stupid people. They work on emotionally open ones. You don't fall for emotional traps because you lack intelligence. You fall for them because your brain is wired for connection. Human beings are biologically designed to seek safety through relationships. Long before logic, before language, before society, survival depended on belonging. Your nervous system still operates on that ancient code. It doesn't just want love. It wants emotional safety, familiarity, warmth, reassurance, and when something or someone triggers those feelings, your brain doesn't ask questions first. It attaches first. That's where the trap begins. An emotional trap doesn't look like danger. It looks like comfort. It feels like being seen. It feels like understanding. It feels like home. That's why it's so powerful. If it felt harmful from the start, you'd run. But emotional traps don't enter your life as pain. They enter as hope. Maybe it was someone who listened when no one else did. Someone who made you feel special, chosen, understood. Someone who mirrored your values, your wounds, your dreams. Your brain didn't analyze them. It recognized something familiar. Not necessarily healthy. Familiar, and familiarity is not the same as safety. Your mind is incredibly good at recognizing patterns. If you grew up feeling unseen, you're drawn to people who make you feel noticed. If you grew up emotionally neglected, you're drawn to emotional intensity. If love was unpredictable, you might confuse chaos with passion. If affection was conditional, you might confuse inconsistency with excitement. Not because you want to suffer, but because your nervous system learned that this is what love feels like. That's why emotional traps feel real. They don't feel fake. They feel like answers to prayers you never spoke out loud. At first, it feels magical. Like finally, someone gets you. Finally, something makes sense. Finally, you don't feel alone. And your brain releases dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and anticipation. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Serotonin, the comfort chemical. You don't just feel connected. You feel alive. And then slowly, things shift. Maybe they pull away. Maybe they change. Maybe the warmth becomes confusion. Maybe the affection becomes conditional. Maybe the connection starts hurting more than it heals. But by then, you're already attached. And here's the cruel part. Once attachment forms, your brain doesn't let go easily. It clings, it hopes, it explains, it waits, it remembers the good moments and minimizes the bad ones. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because your brain is trying to protect the bond to your nervous system. Losing emotional attachment feels like danger, so you stay, you try harder, you give more, you blame yourself. You don't leave because your brain is still chasing the first version of them. The one who made you feel safe, the one who made you feel seen, the one who felt like home. But what you don't realize is that the trap was never about who they were. It was about what they awakened in you. They touched the parts of you that were starving for love, for validation, for belonging, for understanding, and when something finally feeds those parts, your mind doesn't want to let go even if it becomes poisonous. That's why emotional traps don't feel like manipulation. They feel like meaning. You don't just fall for people. You fall for feelings. You fall for possibilities. You fall for what could be. And deep thinkers, empaths, and emotionally aware people are especially vulnerable. Not because they're weak, but because they feel more, they notice more, they imagine more, they love more, they hope more. You don't just see what is, you see what could be, and that's beautiful. But it can also break you. Because emotional traps often use your best traits against you. Your empathy, your patience, your understanding, your ability to forgive, your tendency to see the good. You tell yourself they're just going through something. You tell yourself they didn't mean it. You tell yourself they'll change. You tell yourself love takes work. But there's a difference between effort and erosion. And emotional traps slowly erode you. You start doubting yourself. You start shrinking. You start questioning your worth. You start over-explaining. You start walking on eggshells. You start feeling like you're too much and not enough. At the same time, and the worst part, you don't even realize it's happening. Because emotional traps don't hurt all at once. They hurt gradually, quietly, in ways that are hard to explain. They don't scream, they whisper, Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you just need to try harder. And slowly, you lose yourself. Not because you're foolish, but because you're human. Your brain is not designed to detect emotional danger quickly. It's designed to maintain bonds, even unhealthy ones, especially familiar ones. That's why leaving an emotional trap feels harder than entering one. Because once you're attached, your nervous system doesn't just feel love, it feels survival. And breaking a bond can feel like dying. That's why you miss people who hurt you. That's why you crave people who drained you. That's why you romanticize moments that destroyed you. That's why you go back when you know you shouldn't. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is wired for connection over logic. But here's the part no one tells you. Just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because something feels intense doesn't mean it's love. Just because something feels meaningful doesn't mean it's safe. Real love doesn't trap you. It frees you. Real connection doesn't confuse you. It calms you. Real care doesn't make you doubt your worth. It reminds you of it. If you've fallen for emotional traps before, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're open. It means you're capable of deep connection. It means you feel things fully. But now, it's time to learn a new pattern. One where love doesn't hurt. One where safety doesn't feel like anxiety. One where connection doesn't feel like survival. You don't need to become colder. You don't need to stop caring. You don't need to harden your heart. You need awareness, because once you understand how emotional traps work, they lose their power. You start noticing when something feels intense instead of safe. You start recognizing when attachment is replacing self-worth. You start choosing peace over chaos. You start listening to your body when your mind is confused. You start trusting discomfort instead of ignoring it. And slowly, something shifts. You stop chasing people who make you feel uncertain. You stop romanticizing what hurts. You stop calling suffering love. You stop mistaking anxiety for passion. You start choosing yourself, and that's when the real healing begins. Not when you find the right person, not when someone finally stays, not when someone finally understands you, but when you stop abandoning yourself for connection. So, if you've ever fallen for an emotional trap, I want you to hear this. You weren't stupid, you weren't naive. You weren't weak. You were searching for safety in a world that taught you love had to hurt, but love doesn't have to hurt, and you don't have to suffer to be chosen. So, tonight, ask yourself this: am I choosing what feels familiar or what feels safe? And what would change in my life if I finally chose peace over intensity? If this resonated, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Let it unfold inside you, because awareness is the first step out of every trap.